Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are on this planet. My name is Adamantium, and welcome to this edition of AAU TZM Podcasts. Hope everyone out there is feeling well, and thank you very, very much for clicking in. Just the usual announcement, for those of you listening to this on YouTube, my podcast also exists on talkshoe.com. There's a link in the video description down below with the link to the call series, so you can check that out there. Just for those of you who want to download the full MP3 files for free, you can do that there. Also, in terms of the sponsorship situation, this podcast was brought to you by apathetamol, the drug to induce apathy. However, the pharmaceutical company Razor Pharma, who manufacture them, has just gone bust, so they can't sponsor us anymore. I think it was actually partly because I took the drug myself and I just couldn't be bothered to promote them anymore. You know, I mean, they called me up to pester me about some promotional event, but I just told them I don't care. And I think it was the same for their other sponsors, actually. I mean, they just lost the will to do anything. In fact, I think there was a conviction against the CEO of Razor Pharma on the charge of endangering the economy or something like that. But never mind, why care? We have subsequently acquired a new sponsor now. So this broadcast is brought to you by zeitlove.com, the new dating website for the modern activist. You see, possession of a forward-thinking and status quo challenging mentality is not a winning formula if you wish to find love or even get your leg over, especially for you guys out there, right? We both know that most women don't want to hear about that sustainability and other hippie shizzle. That would result in things not revolving around her, and soon you'll get the inevitable, "So the well-being of humanity is more important than me." Anyway, besides, these kinds of women can't bear to have their perceptions challenged, let alone the kind of men don't want to have their status quo bias challenged. So this new site enables those of you who are of the common sense position of a compassionate and scientific worldview to find other like-minded individuals and see what happens. And just to spice things up a bit, if you go to www.zeitlove.com/AAUTZM and enter in the code name AdamTZM, you will get 13 weeks of free access to zeitdungeon.net for those activists with more of an adult lifestyle. So, okay, that's it for the sponsors. So we will waste no more time and get into the guts of this podcast. And welcome to the show again, Brandy Hume of TVP Challenge YouTube fame. So say hello, Brandy.
Hey, everybody. Thanks for having me back.
Cool. So, Brandy, what do you think about the sponsor situation that we got here?
I think it actually sounds pretty good. I mean, change is always a good thing, too. So, I mean, I know sometimes when one door closes, another one opens, but in this case, it sounds like a pretty good opportunity, so.
Cool. Right, so, last time on the podcast, we were talking about the effect that encountering this train of thought had initially on your own worldview and what that inspired you to do in terms of your activism. So I thought on this podcast, I would expand that out and maybe talk about the kind of effect this had on your friendships, your family members, and even your romantic relationships. So if you'd like to weigh in on that a little bit.
Sure. I have actually been extremely lucky when it comes to my relationship with my significant other. We both watched Zeitgeist Addendum together, and I think I mentioned on the last podcast that we actually stayed up watching or reading all of the Venus Project FAQs. You know, and it stands to reason that anybody else in that situation could be, it could just be circumstantial where they both didn't necessarily feel the same way about what they were reading or what they were watching. And I think maybe that's why we were in a relationship to begin with, is because obviously we had some similar lines of thinking. It just didn't necessarily have to be economics. It didn't have to be politics or those things, but it just so happened to be, I suppose, our interests sort of meshed, I guess, when it came to that topic, and maybe the way we were raised and things like that. It really just came together I don't know any other way to describe it besides beautifully. It just came together beautifully. We were just on the same page, from day one and still are. And I think that in a lot of ways it's strengthened our relationship. I don't want to make anybody else out there feel bad who's maybe run into problems or difficulties with their relationship because of it. But it takes strength. I mean, it does, because you run into difficulties at multiple avenues. It's not like the only person that you have to please is your significant other. So I just happen to be lucky in that area where we literally can rant to the other person for like 3 hours and they're just finishing your sentences. And I know, I saw that video too, and blah, blah, blah. So, you have everything in common when it comes to that. And he's actually helped me with a lot of my videos and some of my material and stuff. He's got all the good jokes, and we really get it together. So that's been great. But that if anytime you can find anybody that you have these things in common with, it's a great support system, because you are going to run into family or friends and stuff that maybe don't get it. And if you don't have anybody to talk to, that can be really hard and make you feel like the crazy one,
Yeah, because I had a really awesome conversation last time with Neil from V Radio about this. And he mentioned one of the questions that Roxanne Meadows used to ask him sometimes is, about his ex-wife. She asked him, do you both share values? And that really did strike a chord in me to thinking about things, not necessarily from the perspective of being in a relationship with someone who completely agrees with the train of thought that the Zeitgeist movement advocates. Not just that, but the very idea of being in a relationship with someone who does acknowledge that things aren't the way they could be. Exactly. And that things do need to change. At least some acknowledgement of that. There's the sharing of that values. And, as you said, you are lucky in that you both do appear to share a lot of symmetrical values in that respect.
Right. And I think this is one of those situations where like I said, I feel especially lucky. I feel like it's a unique situation where we really are on the same page. There might be some people out there who are in a relationship and are interested in this, and maybe one is more interested than the other, or maybe one might get it more than the other or study these topics more than the other, and that's okay. I think what's important there is that, like you said, if the core values are generally the same, then you're not going to get really so much opposition and strange looks from your significant other. They're not going to be like, why are you spending all this time reading this? Or, oh, you're not watching that stupid documentary again. Or, oh, why are you on this website? Because that wouldn't be very good. That's not healthy for anybody. It's not healthy for you, for your state of mind, and you're wanting to grow and learn and get out and venture out on new things. It's not good in that aspect. And then obviously it doesn't take a rocket scientist to see that that's not healthy for anyone's relationship, because it's going to cause friction. And I'm not a relationship counselor by any means, but I think a lot of this stuff that I'm saying right now is stating the obvious.
Yeah, it's common sense.
So exactly. Yeah. So, I guess those are some things that I definitely empathize with people out there who might be having to deal with that, or maybe who are even afraid to talk about these things because they don't know how it's going to affect their relationship or their friendships. And I think I've just, this is something I've told Justin all the time, is I was like, don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. Don't be nervous. Just wear it out there on your sleeve. I don't worry about it. I really don't. And I find that people actually respond to that with more respect. If you're talking to people about something that you're kind of not sure about, and you're like, well, I don't know, it seems a little weird, but I kind of like it, and you kind of don't really know what you're talking about necessarily, then they might read into that as, well, maybe it is kind of like fringe, and maybe you don't know what's going on. But if you're just kind of like, you have conviction, this is some really interesting stuff. Like, we really need to be looking into this, or maybe you should, or here's a website, check it out, and you just kind of stand firmly on your own 2 feet. People are like, hey, I may not agree with it, but this person sure seems to know what's going on. They sure seem to know what they're interested in, and who am I to argue with that,
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, that particular scenario where someone seems a bit flaky about an ideology, that was, it reminded me of when I was getting my, what's my last tattoo? I think it was my second to last tattoo. And when I was sat in the chair, it was probably about 2, maybe 3 months into discovering the movement, and I had some of the ideology down and understood, but not all of it. And I was trying to talk to my tattooist about it, and both my tattooist and the other guy who was working in the same room, they were both sort of like joking between themselves about it, and in front of me as well. And I felt really bad that I didn't understand it completely before trying to talk to it about these kind of guys who would be very vocal about analyzing it and saying, well, yeah, and but because I didn't have the ideology completely down, I wasn't able to break down those misunderstandings,
Right.
So obviously, because of that lack of understanding on my part, even though probably about a year later, I went back in there to just ask if I can just leave some leaflets in his waiting room. He's like, yeah, fine, right, and asked him, I'll tell you what, if you're bored any time, just try and, like, half jokingly trying to suggest that he look into it again, because I was fully fortified in my understanding of it. I was like, well, at any time you feel bored, you can just have a read of it. And he was like, nah, you're all right, mate. Just leave them there. And from that, I sort of got the impression that because when I initially spoke to him about it, because I was kind of flaky in it, because I didn't completely understand it, then I had kind of ruined my opportunity to introduce him to it, because I didn't completely understand it, I mean,
I know exactly what you mean. The way I look at situations like that, though, is I've actually run into that myself. This was probably soon after I started the Venus Project Challenge, maybe was kind of just getting into resource-based economy related topics and things like that. And I just remember Justin we went out to dinner with a friend of his that he worked with and another friend. So it was me, Justin, and 2 of his friends. And one of them was pretty open-minded, and he doesn't necessarily agree with everything and, thinks it's communism and whatever, but he wasn't, like, rude about it. He was kind of just really asking questions and being like, oh, okay, well, that's cool that you're doing that and whatever. And whenever he would ask a question and I'd give an answer, he would actually listen to the answer. But cool. There was the other guy who was actually pretty rude about it and was just his reaction was one of someone who felt that their identity was being attacked just by you presenting an idea that they weren't familiar with.
Yeah.
And so it was kind of an ego thing there it was kind of like, well, how do you do this? Well, how would you get that? That just doesn't make sense. I mean, every time you ask a question and I try to answer it, it's interrupted by silly accusations and kind of scoffs and laughs and just generally a very condescending attitude. And, luckily his other friend was kind of like, oh, I'm sorry. Okay. So back to the question though. What were you saying, Brandy? And kind of trying to be more polite about it. Long story short, they're not really friends anymore. Not because of, I have a point here that's relevant to what you were talking about.
Yeah.
I think a lot of people, might be too quick to conflate the issue with, well, this stuff causes you to lose friends and this stuff can cause you to lose relationships with people. And it can. I'm sure it's a very hot topic and I can see how that could happen. But my point about this story, though, is it tends to shed light on people who really are your friends because they're not really the best of friends because, we don't agree on resource-based economy stuff. It's because he was rude to somebody that's very close to Justin. He was rude to somebody that he loves and that